When I was about 11 years old, I had a regular babysitter named Jane. My brother and sister were 17 and 18, so they were either too cool to watch me or busy with school. Jane was their age, but I think her family didn't have much money, so she babysat for me almost every weekend, instead of doing normal teenage things. My family lived in a pretty wealthy cul-de-sac at the end of a large neighborhood. It was one of those areas where the houses got nicer the further back you went. The houses at the front on the main road weren't as nice, but still not bad or anything. That's where Jane lived. Since I was prepubescent, I was a huge pain, but not for Jane. I considered her my best friend. We did so many fun things together, and I could really tell that Jane loved me. One Saturday evening, my mom was making plans for the following week, but for the first time, Jane couldn't babysit. She had her first prom. She was very excited because the boy she had been in love with for years had asked her. I knew this because she had already told me she liked him since she started high school. My mom and I were both very excited for her, and I saw my mom give her much more money than usual. Jane's eyes filled with tears. She hugged us both and left. Since it was the mid-90s, every babysitter was found through word of mouth. My mom heard from another mother that a girl who used to babysit her kids had just moved back into her parents' house after graduate school. She lived down the street from Jane. Her name was Becky, and my mom called her to ask if she could watch me that Saturday. Becky excitedly said yes, and asked my mom some somewhat strange, but not really alarming questions, like how big I was, what I looked like, and so on. There might have been other questions, but I only heard my mom's side of the conversation. When she hung up, my mom said to my dad, "Wow, she's really thorough." I was a bit nervous, as Jane was the only one who had watched me for years. In the rare cases she couldn't, my parents would usually cancel their plans. But this was a work party where my dad was being honored, so that wasn't an option. A few days before Becky was supposed to come, I begged my mom to call Jane. I wanted to see if I could go to her house on prom night and see her in her dress. My mom kept saying she didn't want me there and that I could see pictures, but I insisted. So, my mom called Jane and handed me the phone. "Hey, May, how are you?" "Good. I wanted to ask if I could come to your house on Saturday to see you in your prom dress." "Of course." "I'm still getting my hair done, but you can come by after. Maybe around 50:30. Tell your mom to call first just to make sure I'm home." "It won't be my mom. It'll be Becky." Dead silence. "What? Since you couldn't watch me, my mom found a girl named Becky to do it." Long pause. "Okay, sweetie. That's fine." She rushed me off the phone quickly. The next day, I went to school and came home to find my mom just hanging up the phone, shaking her head. Poor Jane. Her date doesn't want to take her anymore. They had a fight. She wanted to know if she could still watch you this Saturday. I feel bad canceling on Becky, but it's totally up to you. Of course, I chose Jane, and as always, we had tons of fun. I didn't mention the prom because I didn't want to make her sad, but then she asked if I wanted to dress up. We did each other's hair, put on my mom's dresses, and took pictures with my mom's Polaroid. It was the best night in an 11-year-old's life. Jane went to community college, and by the time she went away to a 4-year school, I didn't need a babysitter anymore. We stayed in touch a little after that, but soon we were both busy and lost contact. The story ended there until this past weekend. I ran into Jane at a bar. She wasn't sober, in fact. She was very drunk. She didn't seem to be doing well. She was very thin, and it looked like she had track marks on her arms. It made me very sad because she was one of the people I loved the most in the world. At least I used to. I sat down next to her at the bar and asked her how she was. Her face lit up, and she gave me a big hug. "I always knew you would make something of yourself. Look at you, all grown up and beautiful. You look great too, Jane." "No, I don't. But that's okay." We started talking, and she drank more. I got the feeling she was in a blackout situation. She was with a group of people who seemed to be her friends, so I wasn't too worried about her. But for some reason, I still didn't want to leave her. She seemed genuinely happy to see me. We started reminiscing, and when it was my turn to tell a story, I said, "Remember when that jerk stood you up for prom? So we had our own prom with pictures and everything? That was awesome." She looked at me with glazed eyes and smiled a little. "He didn't stand me up. The replacement babysitter was a sick asshole. When I was little, she hit me, sexually abused me, threatened me, and locked me in closets. Then she'd invite her boyfriend over to do the same to me. She told me if I ever told anyone, she would kill my family and I'd have to live in an orphanage. She also took pictures of me. I had repressed it until that day you said her name. Now it's all back. Everything. I should have told someone, but now it's too late. I just didn't want people to know what happened to me. I thought they'd look at me differently. I regret so much. Who knows what else she did?" She set her drink down, hugged me, and said, "Nice seeing you," as if she hadn't just dropped a huge bomb on me. She stumbled out with her friend. Everything came back to me. The phone call with Becky, the details. Jane's silence when I said Becky's name. How Jane stayed with me every single weekend until I was old enough not to need a babysitter anymore. Some people say Jane should have told someone, but she was just a kid. But she was an exceptional kid. She gave up her prom to save me. After that, she sacrificed every single weekend to make sure nothing would ever happen to me. She was my guardian angel. Unfortunately, not her own, Jane, and that makes me terribly sad. So, Becky, let's not meet. And if we do, I might just wring your neck for changing the life of the most extraordinary person I've ever known. Next true horror story. This is something that happened this past Friday while I was babysitting. For a quick explanation, I'm 21, a college student, and I've been babysitting since I was 14. I'm not really an expert in anything, but over the years, I've learned caution and resilience. At 15, I took babysitting courses at our community center, as well as a self-defense class for women. I babysit for this family at least once a month. I like them because they pay me more than my usual hourly rate. They have a big house with internet that I can use for homework, and the two kids are surprisingly well behaved and obedient. The two parents have this monthly ritual where they leave the house around 5 p.m. and don't return until shortly after 2 a.m. I'm always offered the guest room to sleep in and stay until morning. Usually, I just stay awake, use their satellite TV, and leave when they get back. The house is in a nice neighborhood without many neighbors, very quiet. Plus, the house has an alarm system that I know the code to and can turn on and off via my phone. That will become relevant soon. So, I always take the kids to a pizzeria that also has an arcade area. I do this so they can burn off energy and go to bed early. Plus, the little girl I watch is on a mission to win a family set of stuffed animals from the prize counter. I'd be the worst babysitter in the world if I didn't support her in this endeavor. In case anyone's wondering, after Friday night, she only needs the dad's stuffed animal to complete her collection. Let's go, girl. Anyway, I digress. I was sitting at a table, watching them play in the ball pit while also typing on my phone. A couple came over and sat at the same table as me. It was a long table with parents sitting here and there, so that wasn't alarming. The couple looked normal, both probably in their mid-20s, maybe a little older. They were talking to each other, but then the man asked me, "Are you the one watching Dr. So and so's kids?" The parents of these kids are both doctors, and in this region where we live, that's common information, but I still decided to answer their question with an irrelevant statement. "I wonder what they use for the pizza dough here." Yeah, I know. I'm a master of deception. I deserve an Oscar for my performance. They seemed to see right through my clever trick, however. They started making weird comments. They talked about the kids' parents, commented on the daughter, and wondered if she would be as beautiful as her mother. Okay, folks, I don't know if that was meant to be creepy, but I'm just going to play it safe and assume it was. Then the woman said to me, and I quote, "Do they really let you look like that while you're watching their kids?" She gestured with her eyes at my t-shirt, which admittedly was a little tight, but aside from a minor chest crease, not really revealing. I have a slender build and a large chest. It's about 30 degrees Celsius in my region of the US, so I can't really wear a hoodie, and my breasts have a sort of Crips and Bloods relationship with any button-down shirt. I took this as my signal to get the kids and take them to get their prizes so we could leave. After some deep and philosophical debating, they both got their prizes, and we headed back to the house. Fast forward a few hours. Both kids were bathed and put to bed. I performed a heartfelt version of Goodnight Moon and read a very creepy chapter from The Werewolf of Fever Swamp, tucking them into the land of Nod. It was around 9 p.m. I had finished my homework and was just watching TV when I suddenly heard noises on the porch. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then the doorknob started rattling violently. At first, I wanted to go to the front door to see who it was, but it suddenly occurred to me that it was late at night. I was home alone with the two kids, and I very much wanted to live. I turned to get my bag where I keep my taser. As I moved, the back door also started rattling, accompanied by some knocking sounds. Then I remembered I hadn't activated the alarm system after I got back. If this were a horror movie scenario, the alarm naturally wouldn't have worked, and the intruders would have gotten in. I don't want to disappoint anyone if you were expecting something more exciting, but I reactivated it. Easy, no incidents. I ran upstairs, grabbed both kids, and put them in the walk-in closet of the parents' bedroom. I still hate that I scared them. When I gathered them, I gave them no context for what was happening. I didn't want to tell them someone was trying to break in, but the uncertainty seemed even worse. I told them to stay there and be quiet, and only open the door if they heard me talking. Then I locked the bedroom door, the only door upstairs that locks. I sat there with my taser in my hand and pressed the panic button in the phone app. Several minutes passed. Then I got a notification via the app that the alarm system had been deactivated. I had been about to call 911, although the panic button had already done that, but I thought it was better to reactivate it. Then it was deactivated again, so I reactivated it. Then it was deactivated again, so I set it again. At this point, I could hear what sounded like 2 sets of footsteps coming up the stairs. Good job. You've locked yourself in with 2 possible attackers. I held it together for the kids' sake, but deep down I was so scared. As I heard the steps getting closer to the door and the doorknob turn, I took a deep breath and pulled the trigger on my taser, just to show them I was armed, although in reality that was of little use. I informed them through the door that the alarm had been triggered and the police were on their way. Thankfully, I was greeted by a familiar voice. "My name is here. It's Doctor, his name. You're safe?" I opened the door, ran into his arms, and started sobbing. I had only really realized how scared I was now that it was over. The kids came out without me giving them the okay, but their parents were there, so I let it slide. When I activated the alarm on my phone, they both received the notification from their location. With that app, you also have the option to view the cameras on the porch. When they received the notification that the panic button had been activated, they saw through the camera that there were people on both sides of the house, a man and a woman. As the alarm was repeatedly deactivated and reactivated, they were trying to get into the house. A police report was filed by them, and I gave a statement mentioning the 2 strange people I had met that day, although there was really no evidence directly linking them to the intruders. The camera footage also didn't yield positive facial recognition. So, yeah, I was scared. I'm slowly getting over it. I'm just grateful that the couple I babysit for were close enough to come to me. I hate to say it, but I find the police response time was terrible. Currently, I'm back in my own apartment an hour away. I've checked in once to see how the kids are doing, and they're fine. I'm just glad they had proper security measures in their house, and that it didn't end worse. Next true horror story. The story I'm about to tell is hard for me to talk about for two reasons. The first reason is that the main part of the story took place when I was about 4 or 5 years old, which makes it difficult to remember most of the details. That's also part of the reason it has haunted me for 20 years. The other reason is that this story makes me uncomfortable even thinking about it, and this is maybe the third time I've truly told it in its entirety. Brief background. I was born and raised in a very close-knit, large family. We all lived about a mile from each other, around a big park in a small Texas town. An unrelated fun fact for the horror fans out there, that park is now the location where most of the murders from the town that dreaded sundown took place. My family was full of aunts and uncles, and I'd say I saw all of them at least once a week throughout my entire childhood. I can't stress enough how close we all grew up and how much we trusted each other. This plays an important role in this story. This story came up recently between my older brother, my mom, and me because I opened up about a series of nightmares that have practically plagued me for as long as I can remember. These nightmares are always very similar, essentially always consisting of me, as a little kid, in my parents' house, trying to escape the house while something terrible chases me. That something is never really seen, but is more like a huge, menacing person trying to grab me out of the darkness, and it always catches me before I can make it outside. This usually results in me waking up drenched in sweat. These dreams always seem to revolve around vague, but strangely detailed memories of a babysitter I once had. This is where it gets strange. These memories I have are almost like dreams. I remember very clearly the details of what happened and the feelings I had during them, but everything else is somehow out of reach. That goes for the babysitter herself too. I remember she was a middle-aged white woman, but I just can't picture her face anymore. In my memories, it's as if I never really got a good look at her. The two specific incidents I remember weren't pleasant. The first memory I have is that whenever I got in trouble, for things I have no memory of, I was forced to sit out on the back porch in shorts and a t-shirt in the winter. I remember this because I was shivering and just sat there, still out of fear that moving would cause more problems. The second memory was even worse for me. The babysitter loved to play a game she had invented. She would turn off all the lights in the house and hide deep in one of the back rooms. I was left in the front room and told that if I wanted something to eat or to watch TV, I had to find her first. I never had any idea where she was hiding, and if I ever found her, she would suddenly jump out, scream like a crazy woman, and chase me. I remember her laughing at my fear. I often remember being so paralyzed with fear that I would just sit on the floor near the front door, too scared to look for her. No matter how long I waited, she never came out of her hiding place. No matter how hungry I got, there's one memory I have particularly clear in my head. I was so small and scared. I was whimpering as I slowly gathered the courage to go down the back hall and look for her. My hunger by this point was almost killing me, and I had to find her. I checked bathrooms, bedrooms, and closets, but nothing. She was nowhere. I remember standing in my parents' bedroom, trying to figure out where she could be when I saw her. She was a dark figure under the big bed, staring at me from under the bed skirt. We stared at each other motionless. I couldn't see her face, but I knew she was smiling at me. She was like a crazy wild animal down there. I remember her quickly scrambling across the floor. I screamed and turned to run as she jumped to her feet, and then the memory goes dark. I don't know what happened after that, and that scares me just as much as the memory I have of the event. I never shared these memories because they seemed so distant, and I often wondered if they were even real. One day in my 20s, I mentioned the nightmares to my mom and brother while we were just sitting around talking. My brother and I were home from college for a week. We often did this, telling funny stories and remembering all the kids we had known long before. Then I decided to ask my mom about the babysitter. She seemed confused and told me she never hired a babysitter for me or my brother because of our large, close family and how protective my mother was of us. She didn't trust anyone but family to watch us. My aunts and grandmother were the complete opposite of the woman I remembered loving, kind, funny, and treated me like their own child. I couldn't imagine them doing such things to me. My mom seemed genuinely confused, but also a little concerned, as a mother would be upon hearing such a terrible story. She told me she really couldn't even begin to imagine who I was talking about. With her certainty and the vague details at key points, I decided I must have imagined it all. Then my brother brought it up again the next day while we were driving together. "Yeah, I remember that," he said, concern in his voice. "I remember you being taken outside and forced to sit there, and I thought it was so terrible. I don't know why we never told anyone." He, too, had no memory of the woman, but he remembered feeling helpless about the whole situation. He only had vague memories of the terrible game she played, but he pointed out that he had no memory of her ever targeting him with her terror. He remembered the events as if he were a spectator. He did, however, remember things that I didn't. This included that I often got in trouble for using my imagination to tell stories, and that the babysitter would often get angry when she realized it wasn't true. That would result in me being thrown out of the house. I just want to point out that my brother is only a year older than me, so he was also very young. I've thought about telling my mom again, but honestly, I trust that she has no idea who I'm talking about, and I don't want to make her feel bad about something that happened so long ago that she obviously had no idea about. I just wish I could understand what the hell happened and who the hell she was. My brother never brought it up again, but he told me back then that he had always dismissed that memory as a misunderstanding because we were so young and just didn't understand what was really happening. All I know is, babysitter from my nightmares, let's never meet again. Not even in my sleep. Next true horror story. My mom told me that if I wanted a new phone for Christmas, I would have to save up my own money, and that was the reason I started babysitting in the first place. A lot of neighborhoods around here are pretty wealthy, and a simple ad on Facebook was enough to get about 6 families inquiring about babysitting jobs in the first week. At first, everything went pretty well. None of the kids were really bad. I guess since they all came from privileged households, the worst problem I had was the occasional sassy remark. But that changed when I got a direct message from the maternal figure of the Pinchon family. "Hello, sorry to just message you out of the blue. A member of my bridge club mentioned that you're the best babysitter in the business, and my husband and I were thinking of having a nice evening out next Thursday. Would you be available?" I knew the name well. I remembered they had been in the news a few years ago, but I couldn't recall the details. This family practically managed half the city's finances. They were rich, powerful, and would probably pay a lot, so of course I said yes. We discussed the price and everything else for the rest of the evening, and agreed that the date would be on Thursday after the following week. When I arrived at the house, I wasn't surprised that Mrs. Pinchon and her husband had already left for their movie night. They trusted me enough not to introduce themselves. My biggest concern that evening was a heavy storm. I even texted them asking if they wanted to reschedule, but they insisted they just needed to get out. "We've been cooped up too long because of COVID," the man replied in the group chat. I couldn't really argue with that. The restrictions were finally being lifted, and that was also the main reason I needed this money. My concern was confirmed when I arrived at their luxurious house and found out the power was out. A boy and a girl, both 7 years old, fraternal twins, greeted me at the entrance. "Hey, I'm June," I said to both of them. The kids didn't even react. "I'm Abby," the girl said reluctantly. "I guess we'll have to play board games by candlelight or something, huh?" I said, looking around the dark house. It was striking how little furniture there was. It also seemed like in none of the photos was the boy visible, which was even stranger. But I shook my head and led the kids to the living room to ask them what they wanted to do. "I'm sure you have something fun here," I asked the two of them. They fidgeted a little. They seemed to have something on their minds, but were too scared to say it. Come on, don't worry, nothing is forbidden. I won't tell your parents, I promise. I teased them. Honestly, I just wanted the time to pass faster. Being stuck in this huge house with two silent kids wasn't exactly my idea of a perfect evening. There's an old Ouija board up in the attic. Can I use it? The girl asked. I scratched my head, surprised they jumped to that idea. But hey, if it kept them happy and distracted, I saw no harm in it. In the attic? How do I get up there? I asked. They eagerly showed me the way all the way upstairs. A rope hung in the shadows, and I paused for a moment to look down the hall towards their rooms. One room was bricked up. What's that over there? I asked. Come on, let's play something scary, the boy complained. I shrugged and pulled the rope. The old attic stairs creaked and gave way. I used my smartphone to peer into the attic and told them both to stay there. For some reason, a cold shiver ran over me as I climbed into the attic and looked around. Most of the place was deserted, just old dusty boxes, furniture, and knickknacks. It occurred to me that I probably should have texted the parents beforehand, just to make sure it was okay to come up here, but the storm had knocked out the signal. I had to go along with the strange game, even though I wasn't sure the parents would have approved. I found the old board game about 10 minutes later, with the twins whining impatiently downstairs. I really hoped it was the right one. When I climbed back down and dusted it off, the copy they had looked very old, maybe even never opened. Let's go to the living room, the girl said, eagerly grabbing the box. We all sat around the coffee table as she set up the strange game. So you want a good scare, huh? I said, rubbing my hands together. I want to call the dead, Abby said, her voice so serious. Who are you gonna call? I teased her. They didn't laugh. They both seemed to be waiting for me to make a move on the board. Shouldn't we ask it questions? The girl asked. I pulled out the instructions to get an idea, but didn't want to admit that I had actually never played with one of these things before. I was supposed to be the cool babysitter. Place the board on a flat surface untouched by any participant, along with the planchette. All parties should agree on questions beforehand, and then ask them one after another. After everyone has jointly touched the planchette, wait 1 to 5 minutes for an answer. If no answer comes, ask another question. I pushed the board closer and let the kids decide which side they wanted to sit on, and said, Do you have any questions you want to ask? Abby cleared her throat. Has anyone ever died here? Ooh, scary, I said. I leaned back and waited. Honestly, I didn't expect anything to happen. I was more worried the kids would lose interest and get bored. Then, after 2 minutes, to my surprise, the planchette moved. Wow, did you see that? The boy asked excitedly. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, the girl replied. I scratched my head, a little unsettled by the exchange as I thought about the logistics. This is how these things are supposed to work, right? Or was it just harmless fun? Who died? We should ask, the boy said. Who died? Abby asked. Very clever, the girl said, rolling her eyes. She didn't wait to ask the next question. And who are you? I asked. Yes. A. The boy stopped laughing and actually looked a little frightened. What? That's my name. How does this thing know my name? Have you played with this before? I asked, hoping the kids were just playing a trick on me. No, never, Abby said. She looked like she was about to cry. Okay, who killed you? I asked. No one moved as the storm outside shook the house even harder, the perfect setting for such a creepy situation. Juneeriageel. Now I was the one who looked confused. What is this thing talking about? You're going to kill me, Jack asked nervously. Wait, calm down, I said, standing up and stepping in front of Abby. It was clear they were taking this all a bit too seriously. Let's just put the game away and play something else. Okay? I suggested. I didn't even want to admit that I might have been scared by this thing too. How could they know my full name? Had their parents told them? Stay away from me, the little girl said angrily, trying to push me away. Enough! It's just a strange prank. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I insisted, starting to pack the game away. What if it's telling us the future? The boy whispered, his voice trembling. I said enough! Let's just play something else. I'm sure there are other games in the dusty attic. Both children remained stoic and silent as I pulled the rope and the ladder came down. Abby looked like a ghost. She was so pale. I'll be right back, I told them both as I reached the attic and put the antique game away. I tried to shake off this unsettling feeling as best I could. It's just a prank, a game. I'm sure their parents said my full name before they left for the evening, I thought. However, as I started looking through boxes, the same unease crept back up. I saw family portraits showing the whole group. Everyone looked happy, and I noticed that Jack was also in these pictures. Why had his parents removed him from the pictures? Then I heard a sharp click behind me and turned to see the ladder was locked back in place. Damn it! Jack, open the door right now! I screamed as I tried to move the lock on my side. No! You're gonna hurt me, he shouted back. I promise I won't hurt you. But if you don't let me out of here, I could get hurt. There are spiders and bugs up here. I hoped maybe to appeal to his empathy. I don't believe you, Jack shouted back. I kicked at the ladder to try to loosen it. Jack, you're going to be in big trouble when your parents get home. This time he didn't answer, and I panicked, kicking at the latch as hard as I could. The ladder slammed down, and I heard a sharp noise below, followed by a startled scream. I looked down and saw that the ladder had hit Jack directly in the face, and he was trying to stop the blood while his sister screamed even louder. Oh my God! Oh my God! I'm coming right down, I said frantically. Jack staggered back a few steps. Get away from me! You're gonna hurt me! I saw what happened next in slow motion. His feet wavered in the air for a moment, then he tumbled down the stairs, his body crashing onto the first floor as his sister screamed even louder. Shit, 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 shit. I screamed as I ran down the stairs, trying to see if he was still breathing. Jack was motionless. I fumbled with my phone to see if I had a signal. Nothing. Stay here. I'm going to the neighbors to see if I can call 911. I told the little girl as I ran out of the house into the rain. Thunder boomed above us as I passed my parked car, and a brief, tormenting thought told me to just get in and drive away. I could pretend I was never here. The parents would never know what happened. They couldn't prove the accident was my fault. I can't tell you how disgusted I was that this thought lingered in my mind as I ran to the next house. Then, as I reached the end of the driveway, I saw headlights in the rain. The Pinchons were back. Damn it, I called out as I ran back towards the big house. I waved my arms wildly at the couple as they got out under their covered garage. They both looked like they'd had a good evening, but seemed surprised to see me. Before you go inside, I need to explain something to you, please, I said. You're the babysitter. What are you doing out here? The mother asked with an angry voice. The father was already unlocking the door. Abby stood there crying. She left me, Mommy! She left me here all alone, she screamed. No, I was going for help, I explained. Was there an accident? Her father asked as we all went inside. Jack fell down the stairs. I tried to help him, but it was too late. I said, my voice barely audible. What? The mother whispered. Abby continued to cry, and I sobbed. It's my fault. I'm so sorry. How do you know what happened to our Jack? The man asked, his voice as cold as ice. What? What do you mean? I was here. It just happened. We all went up the stairs. I saw Jack nowhere. She's been talking to herself all night, Mommy. I think she's a witch, said Abby, who continued to cry uncontrollably. Abby, go upstairs, the mother said as I looked around trying to understand what was going on here. No. When I arrived, there were 2 children, Jack and Abby. Abby wanted to play with a Ouija board up in the attic. I noticed the father's expression becoming more and more concerned. Our son died 2 years ago, exactly as you described. We've had his room bricked up ever since. What? I could barely recognize my own voice. We never understood how it happened. We had a babysitter who had brought a Ouija board to play with. We thought it was harmless. Then the babysitter disappeared, and Jack had an accident. Abby claimed a demonic force was present that night when the babysitter vanished. Something in the attic. We locked that cursed toy away that night. All memories of Jack erased in the attic. He whispered, "I wish I knew if you were the same girl, but that would be impossible, wouldn't it?" I started laughing nervously. "This is a prank, right?" "You're pulling my leg, aren't you?" I asked. He held his wife. Both were now visibly shaken and frightened. "I'm calling the police," the father said, holding his family tightly. "I'm waiting now, trying to explain myself to the authorities if I can. I know what I experienced tonight, but I have no proof. Even the original texts for my babysitting job have vanished, erased from existence. Maybe I really did return that night 2 years ago. Maybe I was here. I'm not sure of anything anymore by now, but as I wait, I've seen Jack jumping around the house. He was smiling and playing. I think he found a way to live on, through their guilt over what happened 2 years ago. It could have been an accident, or something much more sinister from a harmless game. But either way, it has destroyed my life." Next true horror story. I spent the whole summer babysitting to earn some extra money. First, I asked around at school if anyone needed a babysitter for their siblings, or if they knew someone who might be interested. I started babysitting for families I knew, but eventually I needed more money, so I posted an ad on Craigslist. It didn't take long to get a response. The family lived in the suburbs, but what bothered me was how close their house was to the woods, and the fact that they had no neighbors. I was a little uneasy at first, especially since they were strangers and had a cabin in the woods, but I decided to overcome my fear for the money. The house was a cozy little cabin, clean, with a backyard that had a gate leading to a path in the woods. They had little lanterns hanging in the garden and a swing at the very back. The living room had a large window that looked directly out onto the woods, and during the day, the room was flooded with sunlight. The kitchen was right next to it, its counter facing another large window, surrounded by pots, climbing plants, and silly signs like, "Home is where the family is," or, "In this house." Upstairs, they only had the 2 bedrooms. The attic was a tiny room, its window also facing the woods. The kid was pretty quiet. Honestly, I didn't like him, but I didn't dislike him either. I tried to form an opinion, but he just didn't stand out. He wasn't mean or stubborn, but he wasn't a little darling either. He must have been about 4 or 5 years old. So, I just quickly put him to bed and then snuck around the house. I've always been curious about the people who hire me, and I know it's not really recommended, but I just went through people's stuff whenever I was bored. It must have been around midnight when I slowly opened one of the drawers in the master bedroom. It was full of knickknacks, coins, notebooks, pins, buttons. This family collected useless things and left them lying around the house, and I loved exploring them. As I was looking at this little ceramic statue of a horse, I moved it and noticed how the moonlight hit the porcelain from different angles. I wondered if I should just take it or not. Would they even notice? My chest tightened, and my mouth opened. The horse was no longer in the moonlight because this huge shadow had covered it, dancing on the porcelain. As I looked around a bit, I noticed the shadow filled half the room. I couldn't make out the silhouette or what might have cast it. It seemed so sudden that fear rose in me and made me freeze. Someone was at the window. I know it could have been a bird. That's the rational explanation, and I could have resolved all this doubt by simply looking up. But I didn't, because what if it wasn't a bird? I stood still for so long, not knowing what to do, until it passed, and the horse was once again illuminated by the moonlight. I breathed a sigh of relief and put the horse in my pocket. I didn't know it at the time, but that would be my first contact with it. Something made me stop snooping around and just go downstairs. I turned on the TV and snuggled up on the couch. At some point during the night, I heard a creak from upstairs. I know it shouldn't have scared me that much, but I got scared anyway, so I went to check. The house was dark and quiet, and the 2 bedrooms across from each other were empty. Empty. Where was the kid? Jason? My voice cut through the silence, and I felt like an intruder disturbing the peace of the night. Jason, where did you go? I had a constant feeling of being watched, so I turned around and fixed my gaze on the attic door, which was now open. My instincts told me to just leave, but my mind, now spinning, refused. What if we had an intruder? What if he had taken Jason? If only I had looked up when the shadow passed, I would know what I was dealing with now. If only I had had the courage to face it. My voice sounded much weaker than the first time, but I had to try anyway. Jason. Yes. The answer came almost immediately and from the attic. Strange. What was he doing up there? I put my foot on the first step of the stairs. What are you doing up there? It's really late. Your parents will be home soon. Step by step, I tried to adjust my eyes to the darkness. The attic was really dark compared to the rest of the house, and I could make out a ray of light outlining a tiny silhouette. Jason. Are you there? What are you doing? You're scaring me. I finally reached him and placed my hands on his little shoulders, but he didn't react. He just stared out the small window into the woods. What's wrong? What are you looking at? I sat down next to him and stared out the window into the woods. There was a patch of grass starting from the house, interspersed with trees. The further you went, the denser the trees became, until you realized you were completely surrounded by the forest, unable to see the sky anymore, because the branches were so thick. The forest began in the garden and devoured the horizon, like a dark mass merging with the sky. The window framed this darkness, this suffocating emptiness, making me feel as if we had reached the end of the world, and if we dared to go into the woods, we would simply fall off the edge of the earth. And there stood Jason just staring. What do you see? He simply didn't answer, so I decided to find out for myself. As I studied the scenery, nothing special caught my eye. Of course, I just needed to pay closer attention. Yes, the more you looked, the more movement you noticed: birds, animals, even the wind moving the branches and leaves, the grass gently swaying. And then it was the shadows you noticed next, those constantly moving spots on the ground. I could have stared out there for years. Maybe that was the reason Jason didn't move. There's just something about the night that keeps you awake. What do you think is lurking out there? I asked him playfully. Where? In the woods? Yeah, my mother. I blinked a few times. That was unsettling. I mean, kids say weird things, but why would he answer like that? Was that a "your mom" joke? Was he trying to be funny? What do you mean? What does lurk mean? Oh, lurking means, well, waiting in the dark or moving slowly because you don't want to be seen. So, like hiding? Yes. But you lurk when you also want to do something bad, exactly like animals that lurk before they attack, or monsters. I added to scare him. So, what do you think is lurking out there in the woods? My mother, he answered again. My body tensed. I don't want to be funny. Why would you say that? Your mother. That's an old joke, and it stopped being funny a while ago. I'm not making a joke. Okay, let's go to sleep. Your mother can't be lurking out there. I've seen her, and she's pretty nice. I don't know what she told you, but she's not She's out with your father right now, and they'll be home in a few hours. If they find out you're not sleeping, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. Trouble? Don't tell your parents I said that. Come on, let's go downstairs. I'm telling the truth. What is she, a vampire? Something was at the window earlier. It wasn't really important what I was saying, because in my head, everything had a logical explanation. Jason, however, widened his eyes. Yeah, that could have been her. Stop it. It's serious. And what does she want from us? Does she want to eat me? We were now in his bedroom, and I had put him to bed. I had my back to the window, looking into the hallway, which was now much creepier than expected. She doesn't want to eat you. That's great. I taste terrible. Good night. I tried to get up and leave, but he grabbed me. Wait, don't go. What now? I want to tell you about a dream I had. This dream that woke me up. But you have to listen carefully, okay? So, in my dream, I was in the garden and I was thirsty, and you were there too, and you wanted to leave, but there were a lot of bushes and you got lost, and I found this doll. I hate it when people tell me about their dreams, but I sat there, listening, looking at Jason while my back was to the window. Not because his story was interesting, not because I liked being there, but because while he held on to me, his eyes kept glancing towards the window, and I had seen the shadow covering his face because he had insisted that I look at him. But in reality, he didn't want me to turn around. So, I listened until he abruptly ended his story when the moonlight didn't reach his face again. Thanks for the story. It was really interesting. You're welcome. Good night. Night. I spent the next hour in the other bedroom playing with the little porcelain horse. That kid was much braver than I thought. In the silence, I kept trying to pick out familiar, unfamiliar sounds, but had no success. The house had fallen asleep, and the night passed without incident. Shortly after his parents arrived, I put the horse in my pocket and went downstairs to greet them. Was he good? Okay. Yeah, the best. No worries. I studied both of them from head to toe. Their clothes, their gestures, expressions, but mainly the mother. Were you good? The father asked jokingly. I hope so, I replied. They offered to drive me home, but I insisted on taking my bike. I closed the door behind me, but instead of leaving, I went into the garden. I just wanted to see something. I climbed over the fence and got onto the roof of the porch roof, right next to the bedroom window, hoping to see any sign of anything. The window was covered in scratches, but nothing revealed what had been there. I stood there for a while. I don't know why. The parents were probably already asleep, and Jason was probably asleep in his room too. I looked at the garden from that perspective, then at the forest, as quiet as a mouse, then at the room where the parents slept. After that, I don't remember how I got home. I don't even think I took my bike. I just ran in a panic until my legs bled. I didn't even scream. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I just ran until I got to my house and pounded on the door. My mother opened it, annoyed, and I ran past her straight into my room. I covered myself with my blanket and started typing this because while I was watching the parents sleep, something caught my eye. In the hallway, what I first thought was a small coat rack suddenly moved. It had stood there so still that I hadn't even noticed it until it disappeared from my field of vision, then reappeared. That gaunt, distorted silhouette crept into the bedroom and stood right next to the sleeping mother. She looked eerie, like a starved person, with wide eyes and arms so long they dragged behind her as she walked. She just stood there, staring at the parents. Then she raised a bony finger and began to count. I stood motionless, watching this terrifying sight forever etched in my mind. She kept counting on and on, on and on. I was so scared to move that I probably would have watched forever. Only when something else happened that triggered this exhausting run did I break my paralysis. It had seen me. Next true horror story. It happened 10 years ago. I was only 8 years old. That morning, I woke up to the smell of frying eggs and bacon. Stumbling down the hall, I was greeted by the sight of a dark-haired woman at the stove, humming a friendly tune as she filled a glass almost to the brim with orange juice. She turned to me, and I was scared half to death. In a way, she was pretty, but she had a terrible scar running down the left side of her face. "Andy, you're awake!" She beamed, lifting the plate with the delicious-smelling breakfast. I had to run to the store quickly. "But I hope you like breakfast." Too shocked to say anything else, I replied, "I don't eat breakfast." "Where's my mother?" The woman laughed and set the plate on the table, now cleared of crumpled bill envelopes and clutter. "She's gone, so I'm here to make sure you're okay. You can call me Aunt Victoria, or Vicky, whatever you like. It doesn't matter to me. And while you're here, you're getting breakfast," she said in a cheerful tone. Thinking the whole thing might be a dream, I sat at the table and took a bite of bacon. It was perfectly crispy, not burnt like it would have been if my mom had cooked it. She was always so tired that I usually had to get my own dinner from the stove. Will she be back soon? I asked my mother after I swallowed. It was rude to talk with my mouth full. Vicky shrugged. She didn't say anything. Eat your plate clean. Then you can show me your favorite cartoons, okay? But only until 10, then we're going to the zoo. She laughed and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The zoo. I remembered my mom telling me that our zoo trip this year wasn't happening because she was just too busy with work. But if Vicky was taking me, I thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad to have her stay. While I wolfed down my breakfast, maybe you think I was a dumb kid and I understand that. Maybe I was. But you have to understand, my mother was a single parent working as many shifts as she could get. It wasn't unusual for her to send a babysitter if she couldn't make it home in time, although they were usually younger, spent a lot of time on the phone, and might pop a frozen pizza in the oven for dinner. Vicky was different in every way. During the week she took care of me. The house was spotless from top to bottom. I helped in the bathroom while Vicky took care of my mom's bedroom. Every evening, freshly cooked meals, perfectly prepared. I remember on Tuesday we had a pizza that she had made from scratch. I watched her toss the dough in the air like a real chef, and asked her how she did it. I learned from a real chef? Vicky winked, tossing the dough again. In Italy? Have you traveled a lot? Vicky had a slight accent. I think it was British. She nodded as she placed the dough on the pan and began adding the toppings. All over the world. Would you believe me if I told you I met the Queen? She winked, and I realized she was joking. No. Good. You're a smart kid, Andy. Don't just believe everything people tell you. Vicky bit her lower lip as she opened the oven to test the temperature. I never believe what the oven tells me, but this time it's right to make the perfect pizza. It was also the perfect pizza. Vicky was almost too good to be a babysitter. It was as if she wanted to be my mother. To be honest, I think she really did. She was bizarre in small ways I only thought about much later. She was never home in the evenings, and she always did her laundry in the morning. I could hear the machine rumbling when I woke up. Whenever we went out, she slathered her arms and face with sunscreen, almost a ridiculous amount. I asked her about it once. I have sensitive skin. That was all she said before changing the subject. It was late summer, so I accepted the excuse. She also made sure I always had sunscreen on, but even if she was just going to the mailbox, she'd grab the tube and start applying it. I found over a dozen bottles hidden in the linen closet, along with ibuprofen and cough medicine. Vicky loved to read. We went to the library twice while she was there and stocked up on all kinds of books, mostly horror, but she made sure I picked out at least 2 books for myself the second time. I chose 2 books from the Boxcar Children series. My mom had given me a few of her old ones, and I couldn't put them down. I still have those books. After everything that happened, I just never returned them. It was one of the best weeks of my life, but every night I asked the same question when Vicky tucked me in. Have you heard anything from my mom? Every night? She just kissed me on the forehead and told me to chase the dream butterflies. I never knew what she meant by that, but I always fell asleep peacefully. On the last night, I woke up to the sound of soft sobbing. I looked at my clock. The numbers 1 and 32 glowed back in bright red. I got out of bed and went into the hall, following the sound to my mom's bedroom. Vicky was curled up on my mom's perfectly made bed, a photo album lying open beside her. Slowly, I walked over to Vicky and put a hand on her shoulder. You should chase the dream butterflies too, Vicky, I said. Vicky flinched and sat up. The room was dark, but I could see that her mouth was covered with. I turned on the lamp. Her mouth was covered in bright red, as were her hands and her shirt. Blood. Andy. Her voice broke as she picked me up and sat me on the bed next to her, putting her arms around me. I'm something terrible. I've done terrible things. I stayed still in her arms, my eyes wandering to the side. In the album was a photo of the day I was born and my birth certificate. My mom always showed me that on every birthday and told me how she was in labor for 12 hours before I came into the world, and she would go through those 12 hours again if necessary. She loved me that much. I might not have fully understood what labor meant, but I knew she loved me very much. "Are you hurt?" I asked, reaching out to wipe some blood from her mouth. Vicky shook her head. "No, sweetheart, that's not mine." She broke off and shook her head, trembling. I thought maybe I could make things better by taking care of you. But I think I'm only making them worse. Much worse. "Andy, I'm so sorry. Forgive me." "Forgive you for what?" I asked. "Forgive me for the terrible things I've done to you." I frowned. "What terrible things?" I asked. "The worst thing anyone can do." "No, that's not fair." Vicky sighed and let me go from her hug. "It's not fair to ask you for forgiveness." She stood up. "I have to go, Andy. Is there anything I can do for you?" I had one more question. "Why do you have a scar, Vicky?" Vicky reached out and ran her hand down the side of her face. "Terrible things have happened to me too, Andy. The worst things. I suppose that's the reason I can only do terrible things." She took the blanket and put it over me, smiled gently. "Sleep now, Andy, and chase those butterflies to the end of the world and back." The next morning, I woke up to a police officer shaking my shoulder. "Hey, holy shit, guys." I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, sat up, and slipped out of bed. The officer stammered for a while, whatever he had expected. "It certainly wasn't this." "Andy, are you okay?" he asked. I looked around. "Where's Vicky?" I asked. "We'll find Vicky. We need to take you to the hospital." I think I confused all the doctors and police officers with my case. When they broke into the apartment to find me, they expected to find a half-starved child, nearly out of his mind with fear, desperately searching for his mother. But instead they found me dressed and clean, the house in order, and with a full stomach. I think you can guess by now that my mother was dead. I was taken in by my father, who had no idea I even existed. But he handled it well. He had remarried after splitting with my mother, and I had 3 half-siblings I never knew existed. It was fun being the big brother, and my stepmother Mika was super sweet. But she wasn't my mother, and she wasn't Vicky. I had to learn the rest of the story from my father when I was older. The reason the police hadn't knocked on my door earlier was that my mother had been a Jane Doe in the morgue. She had been found practically torn to pieces. Cause of death was exsanguination from an artery in her neck. Her body was found a few blocks from her work. All forms of identification were missing, including her wallet. My mother always had a picture of me and her in it, and they found that wallet, with bloody fingerprints on it, in my mother's nightstand drawer, right next to the bed where I was sleeping. My father still wonders why my mother's killer came back to her house only to take care of her son. But I don't have to wonder. I know. I know this is a long shot, Vicky, but I remember you liked horror, so maybe you'll find this story. I know you killed my mother, but I forgive you.